Han and Horner, where do we have them?
Han and Horner, they are Terran, but
But
They're
they
bad Terran.
They have carriers too,
Yeah.
which are okay, and they have strike fighters, which even if they get stopped by PDDs, they can still search for the crystals. And I think that's really useful. Calling the fleet, you can't hit any enemies, but you can destroy all the detectors. So that's kind of cool. Or what you can do is you use your strike fighters, take out the detectors, and then when you call in the fleet, you teleport your Raven in, and then it'll maintain invisibility, and then it'll shoot down the enemies will get shot down.
Specifically, you mean detection structures. Depending on what race you're against, they might have detection units, which means you can't be completely confident there's no detection, but yes, it does help a lot to thin detection.
Yes. Take out the detecting static detection structures, and then call in the fleet. On offense, for this one, I think it's probably easier to use P2 because then you just have all your Reapers and carriers will be at home, and then you use like Wraiths or something to fly around. It's easier to control because you just have all of one type of unit.
yes.
I put them in B.
Interesting. How about you, Sixbender?
That is quite a bit higher than I expected them.
I see them, yeah.
Was going to cause considerable problems for them, and also the early game was going to be quite painful defending against missiles. Although you can repair, it's going to be really expensive on your early game economy when you don't have a good late game to look forward to.
It is $9 per million, though.
Yeah, okay, but the waves get really big past 25 minutes on this map. It's just that most of us don't have missions go that long, so we don't remember that.
Okay.
Like it basically the waves get just absolutely massive on this map a few minutes after when most people finish the map because they're collecting every single crystal without fail. So with darkness, that becomes considerably more difficult to collect every single crystal without missing a single one. If you still manage to collect every single crystal without missing a single one, then fine, you're never going to have to deal with big waves. But if you don't, you do have some big waves to deal with. I think that, yeah, definitely P2 seems right. You clear with Horner units plus Raven. It's not an easy clear, but it is a decently effective clear.
Serviceable.
If you get enough Horner units, you can mostly not lose units, except for the fact that there's just so many hybrid dominators on this map, which may take some kills, but you should be fine. You still have salvage on Horner units, so you can still get some of your money back, right?
Yes.
Yeah, your strike fighters failed to reliably function as an attack unit, but at least they're an expensive, funky looking scan, so they can look for crystals, which is incredibly valuable against darkness. I would still put them in C tier or maybe even D tier.
I think D tier is the absolute worst I could put Han and Horner, but I'm more aligned to C. But I see Tutu's point where Han and Horner at least does have repair, can deal with missiles using the carrier galleons and Mirahan units, and then push fairly effectively. That does sound at least as solid as Abathur's late game. Well, not late game, but as a whole, because Abathur struggles in the early game, but still gets B. So I can see Tutu's point with B. So
what pushed him into B and not C for me is the strike fighters, because being able to search, especially if you know there are 3 areas, being able to search them without having to like run around the map is really, really valuable. Saves a lot of time.
True. Technically, you can deep tunnel with brutalisks, but
without vision,
you need
if you deep tunnel without vision, they're gonna die if they're actually there.
Yes,
they might die because they get ganged up.
Yes.
Because the waves are there defending the crystals, and if it's immortals, then your Brutalist lasts about half a second.
That's why I said technically your Brutalist can do that, but I digress. So, Sticks
If you
are you
really
going to
know the map,
convince?
technically you can park overseers on cliffs near the areas, so you'll be able to check within seconds. But then you have to actually know where Amon just didn't bother defending the high ground, which is actually a ton of places on this map, by the way.
Yes. Anyway, Sticks are you going to convince Tutu of C or D instead of B?
I really think their clearing is not great, and they're dealing with like the detection issues is it's pretty good. It's better than some people. Having a detector that's invisible and has tactical jump and can be just summoned immediately is pretty good. Bit of an expensive detector, but it can do a lot for that price. However, then you actually have to keep that detector alive as you clear with your dubious army. Yeah, I think that they're going to basically the deal is the biggest reason I feel like putting them in D is because I'm not sure they're actually as good as Dahaka. Despite how bad Dahaka's early game is, he just basically automatically wins past a certain point. And Han and Horner have a slightly sketchy early game into an equally sketchy everything else game. It's just always sketchy.
I don't think Han and Horner's that sketchy early game. You can get detection fairly early. You can repair.
Yeah.
You can shoot down the missiles with turrets. You galleys shoot down missiles. You have mag
Yeah.
mines. You have
Basically, I think Dahaka has a bad early game into a basically automatic win once you get through the early game. Han and Horner has a slightly sketchy but pretty good early game into a slightly sketchy but pretty good everything else. It's just like, I think that maybe it's just because I allowed Dahaka to be too low because I allowed Tutu to be traumatized by the soloing of Dahaka against Missile Command, which is just absolutely brutal and just suffering outright. I know from experience soloing against Missile Command with Dahaka is absolutely terrible.
the way you described Han and Horner earlier about having a slightly sketchy but mostly good everything. That sounds like a C to me personally, not a D.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds
Maybe I
like. At
just
least.
wanted to see Dahaka in C tier is what I'm saying.
Well,
Maybe the real problem is I just can't see Han and Horner above Dahaka tier, but I definitely would put them in C tier if Dahaka was there. I think that's basically what I'm saying.
I can see the point of Dahaka being in D though. Like the early game for Dahaka is terrible enough. He might die outright to
It
the missiles.
it's hard to die outright to the missiles with an ally because literally just the fact that no okay, so an important note for everyone. Missile Command Mutator works such that half of the missiles will go for your structures, half of the missiles will go for your ally structures. This is always the case. They are just literally there are two separate missile counts. One goes for your buildings and one goes for your ally buildings. For whatever reason, we've decided that for solos, we need both of the missiles to go for the person who's their structures, which I guess makes sense, since otherwise you'd have to be like defending one random floating command center from a million missiles. Although the counterpoint is that Power Overwhelming actually has the same system where half of the spells are designated for you and half for your ally. So if you're soloing, there are half as many spells.
I didn't know that.
So that's an interesting thing. But basically, because of the system that we have decided on, Dahaka getting twice as many missiles with a solo, which only happens if you are soloing with literally like the custom maps and all that, means that his base can straight up die to Missile Command. If you are not soloing, if you are playing on the actual live mutation, you have to really just not be macroing into your creeper hosts and static defense in order to actually die to Missile Command. And it will be like a long time before you die to Missile Command. It'll be several minutes
It takes a
in.
long time to get detection.
It does, but your buildings can survive the missiles because the first 5 minutes, like if you're in duo, the first 5 minutes of missiles are not actually that bad. An absolute worst case scenario, you build like a few redundant structures, an extra warden, an extra gas, just to basically diffuse the missiles because each missile will pick a random structure to go after. I do not think Dahaka's early game will be nearly that bad in duos. It's just in solos where it's actually a struggle to keep your Primal Hive from dying and just being stuck without even being able to mine anymore because you lost your main structure.
Sure.
That's solos only.
Sure.
So I think that Dahaka's early game is not actually. It's still quite bad. You still definitely have to know that you are hyper focused on getting missile defenses in place.
I'm
Nothing
not
else really
dying.
matters to you early on. Nothing else really matters to you early on. Just get missile defenses in place. Once you get those missile defenses in place, you win automatically, which helps with the whole you don't care about anything else. Part of the reason you don't care about anything else is because you win automatically, and part of it is because that's like the most threatening thing that you might die to that.
Okay, now let's go back to Hot and Horner. Are you okay with Hot and Horner being C?
I'm okay with Hot and Horner being C. It's just really a matter of I really don't feel like Hot and Horner are a tier above Dahaka. It's that simple.
How about you, Tutu? Can you convince Stixbender that Hot and Horner is B?
Well, if Dahaka's not as bad in duels, Hana Horner is also not that. No one's gonna be like that. They're gonna be better because when they're in duels, right? Hana Horner, in addition to searching for crystals, strike fighters can also see where the attack wave is coming from. At least like kind of scout. So you just send the missile in a direction, and maybe you'll like see some enemies, or you might even hit something if you're lucky. So if you see like the blurs, then you know, oh, they're coming from the north side, then you can prepare in advance. I just think the strike fighters are really, they're free basically, and they're like poor man
Scans.
scan.
Yeah, they're like
They're
poor
like
man
scan.
scan, except without detection.
Yeah. So
How do you feel about widow mines for missile defense?
they suck. Don't use that.
Absolutely suck. Do not use.
They get stopped by PDDs.
Not
Do
only do they get.
they?
Oh, do they get stopped by PDDs?
I
I was just thinking that the problem was just the fact that unless the missile like flies at just the right angle, it gets out of range before the widow mine finishes channeling, so the widow mine struggle to even fire. And then when they do fire, good job, you fired. See you again in a minute. After how many missiles have hit my base?
Okay, so
yeah, missile turret's better.
So, I think Tutu that you have to convince Stixbender that pushing with Hot and Horner is less miserable than he seems to think it is.
Or you could convince me that that scanning of strike fighters is as valuable as you think it is, because I think you're valuing it much higher than I am.
You have 10 of them.
Yes, but just being
minute.
able to see stuff and deal a little bit of damage to stuff you couldn't see, so you probably missed actually hitting anything.
Another thing,
I don't think it's as valuable.
Another thing is that the mag mines, normally with missile command, mag mines get triggered by missiles, but because they're invisible, they actually don't get triggered. So what happens is you can put some mag mines at a choke and then teleport a Raven there, and then when the enemies are there, they get hit.
No, that's
well, you'd have
cool.
to teleport the Raven there when the enemies are there, though, because otherwise.
I mainly use this for like the early waves when you're like very certain where they're coming from.
Right.
That's really cool, though.
But yes, that's also a note, though. Yes, if you want to actually get mag mines to hit enemies instead of just triggering on missiles and then hitting nothing, yeah, you're gonna have to use Ravens like that. Which,
or use P1.
I was just assuming your mag mines would have to be like you have to place them at just the right time and all that, and I just didn't mention it. I don't know why I didn't mention it, but yeah, I was just assuming mag mines were just gonna be like basically null. But I guess with that. Yes, there is a procedure to actually make your mag mines do anything. Congratulations, Hot and Horner. Well, sort of do anything. Mag mines still get blocked by points defense drones. So after early waves, your mag mines still are going to do literally nothing if the wrong missile happens to be in the neighborhood. Yeah. So that's fun. Your mag mines also struggle to exist.
So what about you? How do you feel about Tutu's defense of Hot and Horror being in B?
I am not convinced that their vision from strike fighters and teleporting Ravens, as good as of detection as that is, quite makes up for how just awfully hammered they are by point defense drone. And the big reason I give Dahaka an argument for duos compared to Han Horner is because just literally the existence of the ally alleviates the problem of the missile command mutator, which is specifically a problem for Dahaka in solos. Whereas Han and Hoarder just is bad and will have trouble with the enemies unless your reliance on your ally is, all right, ally, go kill literally everything. I'll provide detection.
Okay. Any more arguments, Tutu, or are we gonna put him in C?
I think the clearing is not that bad. Like Terran, playing against Terran, they scan a lot on this map for some reason. I'm guessing if you're fighting non-Terrans, you take out like their spores, and then you teleport a Raven, which is invisible, and then you kill everything else with your invisible wraiths. And there are like 4 or 5 places with hybrid dominators. I only fight the top right one. I don't ever fight the other ones. I just never touch them.
You can ignore most of the hybrid dominators.
So you're actually saying that
usually it's technically possible for the crystals to spawn in a pattern, which puts like so many crystals next to hybrid dominators, it becomes actually incredibly difficult to win without getting any of those crystals. But that would require you to be very unlucky.
So you're actually saying here, Tutu, that base clearing is close to free for Han and Horner because the cloaked wraiths with no enemy detection have free reign over the whole base.
Yes, just with Terran, they sometimes scan, which is scary because they'll kill your wraiths really fast if they scan. But then against like Zerg or Protoss, once you take out the stuff, they'll have to send their ops, which gives you time to like kill most of the things that are there.
Overseers are really fast though, and obs, yeah. Well, the obs is basically a matter of there will be observers in every single wave, so it really will depend how well you and your ally are cleaning up the observers from attack waves, because otherwise the map is just going to have like 20 observers wandering around aimlessly.
Yeah, how do you feel about that, Tutu? The wandering observers and the overseers that escape.
Overseers, no, actually no. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, you're probably gonna shoot down most things that can shoot you before they get there. You're not going in like to the middle. You're going in from the side, right? So you're not fighting. You're not teleporting in the middle of the island. You're still going in from the side or one of the entrances where there are fewer things that can hit you.
Okay. So what do you say to that, Stickspender? Still not enough to get in B?
I feel like using things like having to have strike fighters struggle to get through point defense drones to get missile or to snipe detector structures, or using like call in the fleet just to kill buildings and no actual combat units, just stack defense structures, in order to be able to cloak cheese, relying on map knowledge and also making sure you get every detector from attack waves and having to worry about scan and be like really quick response times on that. And the fact that your mag mines can't even kill waves properly unless you properly micro and all that. And the fact that point defense drones technically still kind of mess with your wraiths, even although your wraiths shoot pretty fast, so it's not too big a deal. It's just that there's so few of them, at least in the early and mid game. It's only in the late game of P2, and without P2, it's awful. It's basically like there's so many problems and things to worry about, contingencies of Han and Horner, that it's like, it's not that they're unplayable. It's just that B tier doesn't mean not unplayable. B tier means decent, but not great. Han and Hoarder are not decent but not great. They're just playable, which is C tier to me.
What do you say to that, Tutu?
They can do it.
I think C is fine.
All right, there we go.
I think C is fine.
Without prestige, where do we have them?
Still probably C. I don't think they drop hardy.
Without prestige, you just use galleons to clear stuff.
But how about base defense?
Well, honestly, to be fair, okay, without P2, or with P2, did you expand 2-2, and could you possibly defend an expansion realistically?
I haven't played this. I've played this like twice, and then I was gonna play more this week.
I don't think realistically you're defending an expansion with P2. Maybe, but probably not without P2, because 5 carrier guns and 2 carrier guns, respectively. It's like, I don't think you're defending an expansion here. I think you're one basing this one. And honestly, you might actually end up forced off P2, because 2 galleons, I'm not sure is enough for your base to not get absolutely obliterated by missiles. But If you aren't using P2. Okay, so I guess I don't think that prestige necessarily matters. I just think that you're going to struggle to expand. That's another note.
Sure.
But
So
I don't think prestige particularly matters. Unless P2 turns out to be terrible, in which case it does particularly matter. It means you have to not take P2.
so still C.
Still C.
All right.